From the hundreds and hundreds of NLP techniques out there, which ones apply to you specifically, to your specific case, which ones do you need to learn to prioritize, and which ones are almost irrelevant or useless for you specifically, you are going to learn about all of that in this video. So in a sense, I wanted to make this video because there are too many techniques, basically, way too many books, too many authors, and people arriving into the field are usually confused. They don't really know what to start with, and some people already have basics, but then they don't really know what is the next level, the next step, and should I invest time on personal change techniques, or should I work more on my language patterns, my ability to influence others, to do hypnotic language, to put people into a trance, or work more on my resources, developing my identity, beliefs. From all the books that have attempted throughout the years to unify the field of NLP, we can mention, for example, the book The User's Manual for the Brain, or something like that, by Michael Hall. And I think this one is problematic because there are probably every NLP technique, every basic NLP technique you may need to learn about. However, it is mixed with a lot of theory, with a lot of historical background, and a lot of philosophy also behind how the mind works, how do we need to study the human mind. And for somebody arriving into the field, I think it is way too much. Even for me, I dismissed most of the book because I thought it was not really relevant. If he had done several books, why not, but way too much. You have the book by Shlomo Vaknin, I think, the 350 Techniques of NLP or something like that. I think this one is okay as a dictionary, but I don't like it neither because it is not grouped into separate parts. It's like everything randomly thrown like this, and it's a bit overwhelming too to figure out, oh yeah, but what specifically do I need personally? And then you have the only one I would actually recommend, which is Introducing NLP by Joseph O'Connor, and I think this one is the best at unifying the field of NLP. Now, what is the difference with this video specifically? It is that I am going to first of all group all the techniques into three big categories. The first one is going to be techniques for personal change. How do you change yourself? Second is going to be techniques to read, understand the other people. Once you have been understanding yourself, how do you understand others? And a whole part of the field of NLP is actually centered really on that, on calibration skills, rapport building, how do you read people, but it's not really clear which book about what, which technique. It's going to be outlined like this. And the third category is going to be the actual influential patterns, the hypnotic language, the meta model, all the things that have tried to persuading somebody or making somebody else change, the linguistic part of it, and obviously the first part on changing yourself, all the protocols and tools. Once you have understood them, you can apply them into somebody else, and you can make somebody else change with the hypnotic language and with the right tools in the back of your mind. So all the authors that have arrived throughout the years, I would make a generalization saying that this video is about the NLP techniques up to 1985, around that era, before too many other authors arrive into the field, like Robert Dills, like Michael Hall. All those guys have added tons of stuff because they have appropriated to themselves the field of NLP and made it their own, made their own version of NLP, which adds a lot of very interesting techniques, but it is almost something else. It is almost like another field in itself because they have added a lot more philosophy concepts, biological concepts, many other things. So in this one, I really wanted to get back to the roots of what are the techniques you are going to need in your career as an NLP practitioner or somebody who wants to develop his life. So for each technique, I'm going to give specific examples and the type of context in which you can use it or in which it is used the best. What type of context, in which type of context do you really need to use this one, that one, most likely. And in the end, all of them are connected. So it's not like it has to be this one in this context for stop smoking or stuff like that. It is just that some contexts, from my experience at least, are more likely to work with these type of strategies, techniques. And in the end, again, they are all connected. It is just to help you figure out better when you will have trouble articulating what do I need to do about myself with this problem or with that person, with this client. You can just come back to this video because I assume nobody is really going to watch it entirely or like very unlikely people watch all of that right away. It's just something you can come back to when you have trouble, you have just stumbled upon this concept or this term in a book and you're like, I don't really understand what it is. You can come back to this video, click on in the description on the actual tool, method, strategy, technique it is relating to, and just better understand, having an overall understanding of what it is. So I'm not going to go super deep in detail into every technique, like how it is used in every context. In my courses, I give very clear step-by-step processes for one goal. Like you want to handle a phobia cure, okay, you have a course specifically on that, like all the techniques specifically for that goal, and step 1, step 2, step 3. This video is more an overall overview of all the techniques, not completely fully detailed into all of their aspects, just the general component of each technique and what it is made for and how can it be used for yourself. Therefore, part 1, understanding and changing yourself. First of all, it is the basis of NLP techniques. In my opinion, it is first of all about changing, adapting yourself in your own life, and then you can use it on other people. Very first technique, I wanted to put this one first because I like it as an overall overview of how do you see the human mind, your mind and the mind of the people you are going to help change. It is the pyramid of logical levels that was developed by Robert Dilts in some of his books. The idea is that we can represent the mind in 1,000 different ways, but this one, in my opinion, is probably one of the best because it is simple and you always know where you are going and what do you need to work on with yourself or with a client. So the pyramid is about first the identity level, or it may start on the top with a purpose, meaning, spiritual in some versions of the models, but I will keep it short here and simple. So the first level here, let's say, is identity. Who are you, or who are the person you want to make change? What are the assumptions you have about yourself? Do you have a metaphor for who is Marco, if your name is Marco? What is a metaphor to explain who is Marco? Is it a destructive artist? Is it a warrior who never lets himself be defeated? What kind of metaphor would you have to describe the overall higher identity you are, that really integrates maybe not all, but most aspects of your life and what you have been doing so far and what you want to accomplish? And sometimes people need some update on their identity. They may be confused, and what was meaningful and true so far may not be accurate anymore in their current life because they are changing, for example, in which case it is good to reevaluate where you are going. And anything that is changed on the identity level is more likely to help you open more spots faster down the road on the subsequent levels of the pyramid, because the identity is like a massive block all at once. However, any level changed on this pyramid can change the whole thing. So I don't fully agree that changing something higher up is always relating with deeper and stronger changes, because you can change a behavior on the pyramid, you can change a behavior, or you can change the environment, and it might change the whole identity. For example, if you have never been in prison, you become an inmate in prison for 15 years, the environment is going to change your identity. So I don't really agree with the people, according to that model, who claim that any change lower down the scale is less effective and any change to be effective needs to be higher. I wouldn't say it is always the case, although the actual identity, I would say for this one, yes. However, the presupposition that a belief change is more powerful than a behavior change or an environment change, I would say it depends on the people and the context. It's not always the case. But so yeah, identity is really strong. So then values and beliefs, we are going to cover them separately. Capabilities, capacities, what can you do, the skills you have. Are you a musician? Are you a magician? Are you a swimmer? Are you an athlete? Are you a caring person? Are you good as a parent with raising your kids? What kind of skills do you have? Behaviors is what you do on the actual moment. What are you doing right now as of today? Are you recording a video? Are you reading a book? Are you getting mad at yourself or mad at others for something they have done or haven't done? Are you being joyful? All those things are states, behaviors. behaviors that are much more aleatory, and quite often people confuse a state with who they are, or they generalize a state into a belief about themselves. For example, they have been mad one time and they have fucked up one contract at work, and then they become convinced that I am a terrible person just because one negative state or one negative behavior happened one time. It is a massive tool in therapy, in self-change in yourself and others, to dissociate the negative behaviors from your identity and the beliefs that are assumptions about yourself and your life. One thing that happened one time is just one thing that happened one time. It doesn't mean you are the person who did that, or you can, or in the reverse, you can generalize a positive state and work on a positive state and develop it more and more to enter into the field of changing a belief and assumption about yourself and becoming the person who is always joyful, positive. That can be done also. Technique number 2, following the idea of the pyramid of logical levels, I just wanted to spend a bit of time explaining what values are, because they are extremely important to figure out for understanding where your life is going right now. Values, from my experience, are mostly discovered through asking what have been the most important aspects of your life so far. What have been the most impressive, incredible moments you have lived, the best experiences, and what did they all have in common? What did all of those experiences have in common, and what generalizations can you make about yourself based on all the best moments of your life? Either it can relate to your work, to the family you have raised, or how you have behaved with your own family, if it was positive, or what talents you naturally had from the day you were born, or what aspirations in life you had, what things you were naturally excited about when you were growing up. All those things are shaping who you are, and they are shaping what is important for you. When you clearly know what is really important for you, it is so much easier to make clear and important and valuable decisions about where your life is going right now. Or maybe you know what is the change you need, but you don't know how to do it, because there are 10 different ways of accomplishing this change you want in your life. Now, if you want your actual values, the most important things for you in life, it is way easier to dissect and direct, okay, from all those methods, the one I really need myself to follow is this one, because this one respects the personality of an artist, for example, if you're an artist, or respect the mechanical side of the kind of job I have been doing my whole life. Just evaluate that. Technique number 3, identifying beliefs, the belief structure. Beliefs, same thing from this pyramid of logical levels. Beliefs are all the things you are generalizing as being true. And as we know from the field of NLP, any kind of personal change technique, in any kind of personal development book, they say there are beliefs about things that can't be changed, like the sun is coming up tomorrow, classic one. Not really something you can change, unless your name is Elon Musk, maybe in the future eventually. But despite those factors, most likely some things are part of your environment, and some things that are inside yourself are just beliefs. My best example and my most relevant advice about identifying beliefs, more specifically identifying limiting beliefs in yourself, is just to question yourself whenever you have something that really bothers you, or you're not really satisfied about where you are. Just ask yourself, or there is a challenge you don't know how to solve, just ask yourself, is there at least one person in the world who has already achieved this thing? And if the answer is yes, then your problem is only a belief. If there has at least been one person who has been able to recover from a heartbreak in the world, then you can. It is really what the philosophy I use for everything in my life. Every time I hear excuses in my head, or I don't really believe this is possible, or this can be done, or I don't have any proof that this can be done, so, like I don't have any proof from my life that this was possible, so it's impossible, I just rewire and question, okay, is there at least one person? Is there one person who has been able to accomplish that? Has there been ever one person who has felt good by doing this thing I don't like doing? Yes, then my problem is just a belief, and I can work on it. I don't need to do exactly what the other person did, but I can take inspiration and remodel, just change the way I have been behaving, feeling, acting about that thing I used to be limited about. Technique number 4, anchoring. Anchoring is what everybody who has heard about NLP knows about. Anchoring is basically what they have pulled out from, I guess, the behaviorist ages of psychology, of the age of psychology, when all they were doing was torturing rats and making them go through a cage and sending, for example, electric shock treatment on the rat, or the dog, Pavlov's dog, when they would ring a bell and the dog would salivate because in the past when we were ringing at the bell, he was getting food, stuff like that. You can just associate one very positive response to, or one positive state to an actual stimulus. A stimulus can be, if you're a writer, for example, you want to be in front of your laptop and be able to write right away and not have any hesitation, the blank page syndrome. You can associate the state of hyper creativity and excitement whenever you get in front of your laptop to write, for example, or in front of your notebook, anything like that. Anchoring is just about attaching an emotional state to a situation, a context, a person, a kind of gesture, anything that can be attached from the real world or even just inside your head. Maybe just hearing a song inside your head provokes some feeling. It can be felt as an encore. And you can consider basically that anything that is around you can technically be an encore. Some people in your life are an encore. Some people are a positive encore. You just see them and you feel good. Your best friend, for example, maybe, because you have accumulated so many great experiences with that person that now just seeing him and hearing his voice, you already feel good just because he is there. Or the reverse, you may have some people who, you have had so many negative experiences with them that just them being here, you already feel kind of, you don't really want to be around them. People can be encores, situations can be encores, a tool can be an encore, maybe holding a glass in your hand can be an encore if you have been an alcoholic, for example, in that case a negative encore. Everything in your life can be encores. It is really good to identify what are the states you are living on a day-to-day basis and what are the things that triggered them. Was there a song, an object, a situation, your laptop? What are the kind of things that triggered the negative states in your life right now, and what could you do about it to change them? Technique number 5, anchoring a resourceful state, therefore following on the idea of encores, but this time more specific applications of the world of anchoring. A resourceful state is going to be anything that makes you more productive, more ecstatic, excited, joyful, powerful, confident, motivated. Gratitude maybe, feeling more grateful or feeling appeased, cool down, relaxed if you're too stressed in your daily life, any kind of positive resource, any kind of positive state. Now, how do you encore that specifically? You can encore it with a gesture. It can be a gesture like that. It can be a gesture like you want to stand up and slap your body to feel more alive, more awake. Waking up in the morning can be an encore. If the alarm the ring bell of your phone, the alarm clock is really stressful, then it can be an encore for stress, for example. You can develop new encores for positive resources. The most classic way, for example, is to remember an extremely positive moment from your life, something you really felt great about. You really felt joyful when you were living that moment, living that state, and you can remember who was with you back then, what happened, what was the color of the sky, how were you breathing, the kinesthetic. It's all about anchoring all the modalities, the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. How were you feeling? Some people are not really great in touch with their kinesthetics. However, you can develop that. Just pick the sense you are the most comfortable with. If you like to use the visual better, just ask yourself, when I see that picture of my past, what kind of feeling do I get? Or as I am seeing that picture from what happened to me when I was feeling that good, where can I locate the sensation in my body? Where does that start? Does it start in my head, in my legs, in some other place if it was an intimate moment eventually? Just notice where does it start and how does it propels itself into your body, the kinesthetic movement. Or auditory, was there a song? Was it the tone of the voice of somebody you really loved who was there? And you can just use more and most of those amplifiers to build a very strong encore. The idea is that you are going to associate all of that with a gesture maybe. The classical way is, anchoring on fingers like this. So you touch here every time you remember the memory, the very positive memory, and you want to amplify that. Usually people say just wait for the old trainers, just wait for the peak moment of the state and then encore, which has proven to be difficult to do, especially by yourself. So a better method is to just keep encoring, keep touching like this to stack up the encore more and more as you are remembering the positive feeling, what it was about, and you just keep pushing to develop the encore. You can do that, for example, one time every morning for 7 days, and now it's going to be built up. This one, or just a song, I usually encore states in myself with certain songs. I have playlists. It works better for myself, maybe not for you, it depends. But the idea is that you are going to encore a state like that and then use it into a situation where you need to feel better, to feel more courageous, more optimistic, more relaxed. If you were way too stressed in the situation you were into, just anything that will make your life easier. Technique number 6, creating a chain of encores. This one can be used, for example, if you want to attach a positive resource to a negative state. So chaining a negative state, a negative stimulus to something, to some positive resource. One classical example might be that person is always feeling stressed, or you are always feeling stressed in this situation. And down the road, I would recommend to really dig down into what's really happening and why do you get this response. But if you need some quick fix, or if you just need to have access to the resource whenever you will need it, you can actually just understand the negative stimulus. Is it the voice of somebody you don't like? Is it a specific song? Is it a situation? Is it when you're waking up in the morning? Is it your office when you are going to work? Is it your car? What is the main negative, encore, or the negative sensation? And then look for what could be dissolving. What could be dissolving, erasing, at least making lighter this negative sensation? It could be a feeling of relaxation, it could be a feeling of letting go, it could be a feeling of acceptance, accepting the moment, forgiveness, eventually compassion toward others that you can apply to yourself, for example. Classic method about that is talk to yourself as if you were reassuring a young child, and you're going to notice that actually the tone of the voice you use is way more empowering than the one you use to criticize yourself, for example. Just attaching an encore of a positive resource to some moment where you were really not feeling resourceful, maybe you were feeling drained out, insecure, bored, anything negative, you can attach a new positive resource to that. Or you can also chain encores by building up more positive resources, so that every time you were usually feeling the one negative state, you can chain it to one positive resource and the next one and the next one and the next one. So I used to feel scared about approaching people. Okay, you can chain that feeling of being scared and anxious to a feeling of excitement, because usually when you want to match resources like that, when you want to link resources, you may want to match the level of energy. So hyper anger or hyper anxiety with deep relaxation may be too far away. You may need to first attach encores on states that are matching in energy levels. So hyper anxiety, super stressed, attach it to high level of excitement, like super excited, so that it is easier to link it to this one. Then from hyper excitement, you can add like assertiveness, confidence, courage, like boldness, like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. And then attach anything else like salivating, rejuvenating, humor, for example, where you just feel ecstatic about life like that. And you just attach more and more resources to this one negative state. That way you just have the negative state, you build up all the encores, and boom, the whole chain happens, and you don't even need to change it because you're already in state just by being confronted to the negative situation that used to bother you. Technique number 7, collapsing encores or encore collapsing. This idea is that you have a positive encore and a negative encore. For example, the way I learned it was in the Tony Robbins book, The Unlimited Power, and I used it. It really changed my life at this point. At that time, it was the idea of seeing in your right hand the positive energy, some positive resource, and seeing in your left hand, or the reverse, whatever, in your left hand, the negative sensation, a negative state. And I used to picture that with like a negative, like a black sphere or some dark energy right here in my hand, and here some blue, colorful, lightning ball of energy right here. And then I would just imagine the good one was collapsing into the black one, and then I would do that and put it into my chest, and I would really like have an electric jolt and like, whoa, something is happening. Doesn't work with everybody. You have to shift the techniques, apply them on yourself, maybe change, do something else. This one just really worked on me, for example. The idea is that you take two resources, a negative one and a positive one, you put them together and you notice the shift. It only works if you have really spent a bit of almost self-hypnotic time to elaborate the sensation by looking at this. So you basically encore the hand gesture, the hand movement, the seeing of your hand right here with the sensation you want, and you really encore the negative one on this hand, really the difficult, painful thing on this one, and then you want, for example, to pour, like if it was water, you want to pour it on the negative one so that it shifts, the color changes, anything like that. Another way I have been applying that down the road in a more conversational manner was by asking somebody about the person he wants to become, for example. If somebody had a problem with approaching women and he was always feeling anxious and scared about it, I would be asking him, let's say 5 years from now, who do you strive to become? In a general way, incorporating your career, your money, your family, anything you want. In a general way, who are you thriving to become? Coming back to the identity. And you want to become this person, somebody who is talented and relentless, for example. So, okay, talented and relentless are their self-encore to trigger a very immense positive sensation, because it is identity level, it is pretty huge. So I would say, okay, so how does a talented and relentless person act about this anxiety you have been feeling? And in that case, I am collapsing the encores because I am using the very strong, powerful encore that is contained in the words that person has just used to describe an incredible positive sensation. And I just make it collapse in my phrase by linking that with acting with this about the anxiety, the feeling of being scared, all of that. And every time I ask this question, the person goes, boom! Oh, like massive shift is happening. It is just the conversational way of using encore collapsing. And all of those techniques down here, the idea is that you need to understand the basic principle and have been applying it in a step-by-step manner like this, very simple. As down the road, as you progress, you will just use them conversationally. You won't really think about it, it will just be automatic. However, you need to have been using them on yourself, because that way you will have an unconscious imprint for what to use at which moment, with whom, in what kind of similar situation did I use that for myself. It makes the whole thing way easier. Technique number 8, submodalities and sensory representations in general. It may be called the cinema of the mind, the movie of the mind. Basically, all the movies we make in our minds all day long about positive expectations, about negative expectations, about negative failures from the past, maybe all the things that are really happening non-stop in our minds. As a disclaimer, I think this one, all the field of submodalities, of altering your own states by shifting the images in your mind, all of this is, to me personally, the most impressive aspect of NLP, and the one we really have been testing and elaborating the least from all the techniques, just my personal opinion. However, I really think it is tough or even impossible to use that on yourself if you haven't been learning yet any kind of meditative process, any kind of self-hypnosis process, or if you're not used to go in trance by yourself, because all those techniques need to have a calm state of mind, a relaxed, calm state of mind. Most likely all those images, those pictures and all those sensations in your body, all those sounds in your head, the voices, it is going way too fast in the normal awake state for most people to really catch what's happening. And when in the book you see just take the picture and shrink it, yeah, but when you are not trained to go down into some kind of self-hypnotic trance, it's not really going slow enough for you to understand what's happening and to even less alter it. So basically submodalities are all the submodalities of your senses, of your sensory representations. If you have an image in mind, then what is the color of that image, the size of that picture? Is it big, life size, or small? Is it in black and white, or can you put it in black and white? The auditory, the sounds, is it a voice close to you, tampering in your head, or is it a voice far away, distant in the future? Like, is it a voice really loud and clear and powerful, or is it a voice really mumbling and shy? And the sensations, is it in your chest, is it in your head? You can link sensations with the chakras, maybe, where it is located in your body. And is it warm, is it cold, is it really strong and static, or is it moving around and malleable? You just want to elaborate all of that. One very interesting thing to do with this process, once you have a bit more clarity about what's happening when you are in a negative state, in a positive state, is to use, for example, synesthesia. Synesthesia is all about shifting another sensory representation. So, as Einstein used to say, the problem cannot be solved at the level it was created. So, for example, if your problem is that you keep hearing the voice of a very negative person who kept criticizing you when you were younger, for example, then you may have trouble to just dissociate or alter the voice because it is way too present and it has been anchored way too deeply in your head. However, if you shift that to the visual side, so you bring that voice on the visual side and just notice what color do you see linked with that voice, for example. Or if it is a very negative sensation, then what is the voice tonality of that sensation? And you are going to make the whole thing confusing at first, and then it will allow you to shift way more easily, because you will just break the level at which this limitation is, which opens a whole new set of doorways, pathways, and you can elaborate new techniques, new strategies to feel better in that moment. Technique number 9, the new behavior generator. Following this idea of the cinema of the mind, of the movies that are happening into your head, you can program yourself to do something better than you have been doing. For example, if you visualize yourself, and this is no big secret because every book about personal development talks about visualizing yourself succeeding, yeah, sure. I would just add something more specific to that. Better target what is the behavior that is going to be the most helpful, related with your current challenges, but your challenges need to be clarified. Usually beginners will use that, for example, as, okay, I am a smoker, I want to visualize myself not smoking or throwing the cigarette away. I don't think it is the right method, because for this technique to work, you need to dig deeper into the source, the actual source of what's happening. Why do you smoke? Why do you smoke? What are you trying to avoid by smoking, or by overeating, or by not sleeping at night and scrolling down your phone because you don't want to get to sleep? What are you trying to avoid? And that thing, the thing you are trying to avoid because you are uncomfortable, which is normal, you are a human being, it is completely normal to be anxious about things that are going to happen, that may have been happening before. That thing you want to avoid, or you're trying unconsciously to avoid it, and it's like confusing and you don't want to look at it. That thing, you just take the absolute counter opposite. So if that thing you just don't want anymore, if that thing was gone, what would be there instead? How would you be behaving instead if that thing you're trying to avoid was just gone out of your life, away forever? Then how would you be behaving? Who would you be if it was the case? And that new identity, representation, idea, behavior, this is the one you can visualize, for example, every night before going to sleep. I think those changes are more effective than trying to change a behavior too low on the scale of the very small symptoms linked with a negative state, sensation aspect of your life. Just really dig deep into what's happening up here, like on the really higher scale, the source of the problem, and look for the exact absolute counter opposite of the the problem and visualize this, the thing you would be if the core, the source of that problem was not happening anymore, hadn't even never happened. What would you be? Who would you be? Who would you become? And then this is what you want to visualize. Technique number 10, the confusion into understanding. This is one of the ones I say is really so much not used enough, so much downplayed in the field of NLP and specifically submodalities, because I have had incredible breakthroughs about my life by using just this one. And so few people are using it. Maybe because it is a bit too technical, I don't know, but really use that one. It's really a mind-blowing, effective tool when you use it correctly. So the idea is to take something you understand extremely clearly, something you are already a master at, even if it is just playing your favorite video game, whatever it is, just something you perfectly master and understand very correctly, and then you are going to elaborate a picture, an image, a representation of the thing you are really clueless about. The thing that is so confusing, you don't even know where to start, there are way too many things to handle, and then you are going to pick the submodalities, therefore all the colors, the lightning of the picture you have about the thing you are a master at. That thing, for example, if you are a great mechanic, for example, you just have an image of yourself doing the mechanic thing or whatever, and you just notice, how is this picture? Is it like close to me? Is it far away? Do I see the lightning coming from this side, from that side? Is it really dark? Do I see other people? And you're just going to print the structure of that picture. Then you are going to visualize the thing you are extremely confused and unsure or uncertain about with those exact same submodalities, with the same lightning, the same image location in your mental space. When you close your eyes and you notice where is the picture, you can just put the picture of the thing you're confused about exactly, slip it exactly in the same place, all of that. It is going to open many new pathways. The first few seconds, it may be just confusing because you may be like, the image may be shifting, you may be seeing different colors, abstract object, or maybe something else may pop up, something that you thought was completely had nothing to do with that, but actually this is the message your unconscious mind is sending you to tell you, this is what you want to focus on. Just shut up and do this. Those are the clues you may get when you do play with the cinema of your mind. Technique number 11, changing a belief or belief change, and that is one I highly disagree with many things written in the textbooks, because usually what you hear about belief change is, oh, just pick the belief you want to believe, the thing you want to believe about yourself. So I am a confident person or whatever it is, and you want to make the submodalities shift or like some anchoring of something you believe to be true. You have the encore of something you believe to be true, and then you fire the encore on the thing you want to believe. Okay, that can be, if you are the therapist, the coach with your client, then yes, because you have probably been investigating your client and you know what to act upon. However, I would really sincerely, seriously discourage doing that on yourself, by yourself, with planting a new belief, because I think as human beings and with defense mechanisms and the homeostasis, we always want to stay the same somehow unconsciously. We tend to never really see what belief is valid and is valuable. You may plant in your head a belief that is just going to be destructive, and you may just be obsessive about relentlessly chasing something that is actually very unhealthy for you. But how to know that if you have been investigating the belief you need while being in a state of already being super anxious and stressed and obsessive about, I want that. In that state, if you try to find which belief is going to make me succeed faster and you are obsessive about it, yeah, you're going to find the belief, but you're going to plant it. It's going to make you even more obsessive and more burnt out and more aggressive. Or this is just an example, there might be others. Those things I think are detrimental. What I am recommending with belief change is to do something completely different, is to do just the confusing a negative belief. I think this one is way healthier, and you don't need to investigate yourself as much to shape it like this. So you just take something you don't like about yourself. You take, instead of trying to plant something new that you don't even know if it is ecological or not, you are going to, for example, take one thing you don't like or something you think you are really not good at bad at all. Like I am not talented for music or whatever it is, or I am not good for drawing, I am not artistic, anything you don't like about yourself, and you can plant the encore, use an encore or the shift of the submodalities of something you strongly believe to be untrue, something you strongly know is just not true. Something like, let's say you don't believe in aliens, you don't believe there are life out there in space, whatever, if it is true or not, just something you personally really strongly believe it is not true. You are going to encore the thing you strongly believe that is just not true, and there could be no way to convince you this is reality. No way. Avoid any topic where you are kind of unsure and like, yeah, but maybe if this person was convincing me. Not this. Just something something that is in your head is a strong no, like impossible. Completely impossible. I know it's not true. You strongly encore this thing, the thing you believe to be not true, and then you are going to fire the encore on the thing you don't like about yourself. So I strongly encore the belief, for example, that I am not either an Indian person or a black person or an Asian person. I know I am a white person, for example. That's a pretty normal ethnicity. Nothing weird about it. So I know I am none of those ethnicities. I am just a white person. I was born a white person. So I can encore I am not all of those ethnicities. That's something I know to be true, or I know to be untrue. And then I would fire the encore on I am not artistic or any belief I don't like about myself, and boom, and then you shift the whole thing you don't like about yourself. So you confuse or you erase or you decrease the negativity of a negative belief instead of trying to plant something new, because from my experience, new positive beliefs just emerge by themselves naturally when you have shaken a negative one. So I would recommend better to shake, confuse, erase the negative belief, make them confused, make them untrue, make them turn them upside down. Any submodalities representation you can have to shift the negative beliefs, and you are going to see in your head all the positive counter opposites are emerging by themselves. It's like you're opening the doorstep and the right thing is coming out of it naturally. You don't need to force and plant it. The phobia cure, technique number 12. This one has been extensively talked about in so many books and courses and seminars that I don't really want to spend too much time on it. It is basically an application of all the submodalities, possibilities, and it is, I would say, a general principle to know about for any kind of negative behavior you encounter. The basis of that pattern is to dissociate the person, so you make them see the thing they are relentlessly worried about, or the thing that is really chasing them in their dreams, whatever. You just make them visualize that dissociated while being maybe loosened up and getting them in a cool, relaxed trance state where they are in a white room, for example, and you make them visualize on a screen the thing they are really worried about or the thing that has been chasing them their whole life. So first of all, the dissociation plays a role into relieving a bit of the negative sensations that may be linked with that thing. Then you make them see the thing from the outside and turn it into black and white. So removing the colors and maybe shrinking the picture or the movie of the thing that is really bothering you may help already a little bit. And then you are going to make them reverse the movie backwards. The reversing process has some trouble to work with me personally, but I know it works with many people. As usual, it is only about elaborating what works best for you. Like, you don't need to master everything. It's just about what works best with you, for you, in the areas of your life you want to change. But basically, the phobia cure is about dissociating, put the colors in black and white, or the image of the thing you are worried or scared about in black and white. And then you are going to reverse the movie of the thing that is chasing you, all those negative memories or sensations that are chasing you. You just make them go upside down and make them loop backward, and then like Bandler says, add some circus music like to the movie, and it may just change the whole sensations you get from watching this movie or this thing from your life. You want to question your client, or if it is yourself, do that and shift the memories, images, the pictures, until you have the sensation that has really faded away, maybe not completely disappeared, but at least faded away. Once it is enough cooled down, then you can step inside the picture and feel what it feels like after you have been seeing it from the outside, being dissociated, you have seen it was not affecting you as much anymore. Then you can step inside the picture, become the person you are becoming after having done this shift, and notice what different sensations you get from it. And from that position, a very interesting thing to do is to future pace yourself. Notice where can you go based on this new version of yourself. Linking a future pacing with a new behavior or new change or new sense of identity is always very powerful, because it is allowing yourself or the client to ratify how many other elements are going to be attached and linked with that thing, that new change. It is also helping to basically encore that new change with situations, new people you are going to meet around you in your life. If you future pace your client and you ask him, so from that point in time where you feel relieved about this phobia or whatever, what else can you do in your future? Or 1 year from now, what are you capable of doing that you were not capable of doing before? And for example, if he says, oh, I see myself married, or I see myself with John, who is his best friend, whatever, okay, then John becomes an encore for this positive change, which is an extremely positive resource to have in life. Technique number 13, the switch pattern, which never worked with me. I'm sorry. I have met people with whom it worked really well, just it never worked with me. Again, it's really more about figuring out what works for you instead of trying to master every technique out there. Just test them all and then figure out what works best for you and amplify that. But basically the switch pattern is about having an image of the behavior you don't want anymore, the behavior you want to change. So if you are a smoker, or if you are a person who always gets mad or who always worries at night, then you want to make a picture of the other behavior you want. So a behavior of yourself controlling yourself and tempering your emotions when you are about to binge into the food you should not be eating. You just make a picture of yourself tempering yourself, controlling yourself, acting in a much more relaxed or spontaneous way. And then you are going to make this new positive behavior in a small corner of your mental screen when you close your eyes, in a small corner, and you have the big negative picture of your behavior, seeing yourself dissociated, on the main front of your mental screen as you visualize that. And then you are going to rapidly switch, like a whip. You are going to switch the two images, so the small positive one is getting bigger and brighter and more colorful and more powerful, and the negative problematic behavior just becomes dark, tiny and small and in the corner of your eyes. This is an idea to better develop the capacity of your brain to engage into the new behavior and forget and push away the one that is not relevant at all. You can use it, again, it never really worked with me personally, but you can use it for sure. If you sense, first of all, if you feel like it is something that you want to try, then go for it. Your instincts are really good at knowing which technique is good for you. Anything I'm talking about, or you read in a book and you're like, oh, then go for it. Like, don't even question it. Should I do? Just go for it, because your instincts are really telling you, your motivation, your excitement is telling you what is good for you. At least in the field of NLP. When we talk about money and food, it's a more complicated topic. Instincts are sometimes blurred and difficult, more tricky. But for the NLP techniques or anything purely intellectual, then just follow your instincts. They are the best at guiding your behavior. Technique number 14, changing personal history. It has thread to what we encounter many times in NLP books called timeline therapy. It can be used that way. Changing personal history is anything that has going to be thread to erasing, diminishing the negative imprint, sensation, ectoplasm of some negative things that happened to you at some point. So for example, if you have had one negative behavior or negative statement about yourself, or some negative voices that have been shaping the way you are today, or some fear of taking action that has been bothering you for years and years, and you have somehow made a generalization sensation of this being who you are because you have just repeated that too often. Or maybe every time you want to engage into a new behavior, a new path of life, you are just getting bombarded by worrying thoughts of what you have done in the past, where you have maybe tried something new and it failed, or you were not capable of doing it before, and you just have those images constantly coming back in your mind, in your head. In those cases, you can use this technique, changing personal history, where basically you are going to diminish all the negative impact this thing has in your life. There are many ways of doing that. One way I like using is just to use the submodalities again, and actually I think this one is more relevant than the phobia cure, or at least I think it is easier to use, personally at least. You can just use the image you have of the one thing that is really blocking you, the one thing from your past that is really blocking you, the negative memory you have that is just telling you, oh, you're not good enough for that, you don't deserve that, blah, blah, blah. This thing from your past, you just notice, same thing, the image you have in mind, you are going to turn it into black and white, and you can do that slowly as you talk to yourself. You just guide yourself as if you were your own personal advisor, guiding yourself through trance and allowing yourself to shrink down the picture of the thing that has been bothering you, the thing that has been impacting your life in a very negative way. You're going to shrink down this, and once it is shrink down enough, and maybe you have turned down the volume of the voices that were criticizing you, or the phrase telling you, oh, remember that, you have failed, all those things, you just turn down the volume, or maybe you push away the voice, or you make it being said with the exact voice tonality of somebody who is extremely funny and not caring about anything anyway. In that case, it will just shift the sensation that voice has on you. Once it is decreased, basically, once it is diminished, slowed down, decreased, once the negative effect of this has been leaving you at least a little bit, or is being confused, or is being shut down a little bit, then you can take a deep breath and just push it away. Imagine you're pushing it away. If it was just an image in front of you, you just push it away, and you repeat that like 5 to 10 times. Really, every time you bring the image up in your mind and you push it away. Once you have done that, and the breathing obviously drastically helps, it will just shift a little bit the kinesthetic negative ectoplasm lying in your body, and that always makes you feel like, yeah, I don't really feel like doing this. This thing is going to be shifted and shaken and changed, and from there you are going to plant a picture or paint a picture of how you would have liked to act into this specific scenario. The thing you have failed, or the decision you have been extremely bad with because you have taken the wrong decision, and now you are just criticizing yourself for not having taken the right choice, for example, you can just pick that, the thing you would have liked. The thing you would have liked to do, to act upon, the way you would have liked to act, in the way you would have liked to think back then. You just paint a picture of you acting like that in your past. What would you have been doing differently? How would you have been talking to yourself back then if you had been acting exactly in the way you wanted? Once you paint a colorful, big, brilliant, shiny, giant picture of this, and you fire off the feeling of what it feels like to have been acting that way, and you notice who are the other people around you who have been affected by that in your imaginary past, but the unconscious mind does not differentiate what is imaginary from what is real. So anything you visualize clearly and powerfully can be felt as if it was being real, and it can create a new neural pathway, a new encore with positive resources. And from those positive sensations, then you can ask yourself, okay, so what do I need to do today? If that thing had been true, if that thing I'm just visualizing now had really been happening exactly like that, then what would I be doing right now? And it will give you a whole plethora of new ideas, new thoughts, maybe rewiring your feelings, your sensations. Maybe it's going to make you think differently about who you are, about what you can do, what you want to do. Maybe it's going to make you realize that once something you wanted to accomplish was actually completely irrelevant, because you were just trying to run away from the negative scenario, the negative past. But now that this negative past is shaken down in a way, you feel like, oh, actually, I don't even need that. I don't need to have $1 million or lose 50 pounds of weight right away. Maybe you won't even feel like you need to go that fast right away. You will feel more cooled down, more tempered down, because you will be kinder with yourself and more accepting, having more acceptance and compassion with what happened to you in the past. Technique number 15, and closing and finishing this first part on changing yourself, understanding and changing yourself from the inside, the resource triangle. This one is extremely important because probably like 70 or 80% of the protocols, procedures, processes you see in books from Robert Dills, from Michael Hall, from many NLP trainers that may seem very complex, they almost all come down to a version of this, of the resource triangle up here. It's always the same process, then you can add many more steps. Robert Dills likes to add 16 to 25 steps in the process, but it is just about how far you want the creativity to lead you. If you want the most simple version, so if you understand this one, you have understood probably 80% of all the complex NLP processes for change. This one is really the root, the big root of all of them. You just have the present state, you have the desired state. So present state, it's what's happening right now. Desired state, you ask your client or yourself, what is the outcome? You don't want to smoke anymore, but what will you be doing specifically that is positive when you won't be smoking anymore? You want to build up that outcome, the desired state. And then what is the resource? What is the missing link, the anchor, the resourceful state, the submodalities shift, the identity level belief? What is the one resource? It can be a state, it can be an emotion, it can be a memory, it can be something from your past, it can be a phrase you say to yourself, it can be something written on your wall, it can be a visualization, it can be a trance process, a hypnotic induction. What is the resource that is going to lead you from the present state to the desired state? And usually we do that in the beginning. The basic NLP was to do that on the ground. So you just anchor those positions on the ground. For example, you take a piece of paper and you just, or maybe you can take a book or a piece of paper and you write down number 1, which is present state, or you write down present state on it. You put that on the ground and then you ask your client or yourself to step on it to notice what is the actual present negative state. Then you have a second one which represents the desired state, and you may at first just step out of your negative stuck state and notice by looking at the present state and the desired state, what do you really understand from that? What do you really understand that you are not doing correctly, or maybe that you are doing way too much of? And what do you understand about the resource that needs to be added into the resource case? And then you can make the person go into step onto the actual anchor for the resource, make him fire off and anchor the resource, and then make him go back into the present state to shift all the negative sensations, then into the desired state, and on and on. And you can use this anchoring process on the ground with literally all the techniques that have been outlined in this first part, specifically the identity, the pyramid of logical levels. You can make somebody step onto each of the steps of the ladders to make him go further and further on the evolution, on the process of evolving, changing himself. And this is really the foundation of probably every NLP tool out there, for at least for personal change and helping others. It is really identifying the present state, the desired state, which resource is available, and then just tweaking with your language patterns, your skills and abilities that you are going to learn more about in the next part of this video. You can just keep switching and altering your language and your mental strategies until you make the resource a reality and until you make the desired state come true. Part 2 of this this little expose on NLP, after a little break where I had to get some fresh haircut, as you can see, we are going to talk about here right now on the aspect of reading and figuring out people, because I'm going to explain, most people who start with NLP, they want to go straight into hypnotic language, sleight of mouth, the Milton model, how do you presuppose something unconsciously so that you influence their mind without them knowing. Yes, yes, sure. And the problem with that, after having seen students for years and years, is that they want to go too fast and straight into persuasion and persuasive linguistics, and they start using it, and then they come back. So after they failed 2 or 3 times, then they start to listen to me, finally, because they are like, yeah, but people resisted, or I'm just facing resistance with my clients all the time, or I said this, it was supposed to work, but they didn't change, or they didn't say yes. Yeah, and now you can listen and keep your mind quiet for once and listen to me when I say that you first need to understand which state people are into. Develop your state awareness, your calibration skills, reading the body language, reading the voice tonality, understanding which underlying presuppositions are hidden into people's language before you say something. Because without all this structure, this background, this foundation to understand the person in front of you, you will just say the right thing and it won't change anything. It won't make any difference, because you will have been missing the target. You will have been missing the point, which was, what did they need at this point? What did they need to hear? And understanding what people need to hear is all about calibration skills, understanding, developing your state awareness. Which state are they into? Are they angry? Are they pissed off? They are meta programs, even if I didn't include it here because I think it's pretty general, but meta programs, are they more oriented towards solutions, or do they just want to talk about the problem endlessly? All those minor distinctions, if you don't have a thorough understanding of that, or at least you haven't been practicing your intuition on understanding what people are about, then any kind of persuasive language and hidden hypnotic phrases, they won't do anything, because you will not hit the right belief, the right state change they need, or the right objection that is really hidden behind the main limiting belief you think you see, but there is something deeper, like they are scared of something. And you need to figure that out to really say the right things and make people change or persuade them about whatever you want to persuade them about. So technique number 16, state awareness. What do I mean by that? Is on the most basic level, we are going to go more thoroughly and deeper and more specific on how can we dissect this awareness and this understanding of people. But the classical one, calibration signals. So those right here are really the most essential things you need to pay attention to whenever you are talking with somebody, whenever you are discussing with someone. When you really pay attention to this, you will just phrase your arguments or your suggestions in the right way, and all those added resistance or all those objections, you won't even face them, because you will have been understanding how to phrase and how to change the state of the tone of your voice, how to alter your perception, how to alter your the rapidity at which you speak. Do you need to speak faster, slower? All of those things, your unconscious will calculate them very easily if you keep being focused and aware on the person in front of you and use those signals. You don't need to measure all of that at the same time, not at all. But for example, the smiling and breathing pattern. Breathing is obviously the biggest one, because when people change their state internally, their breathing tends to change. For example, something that you are going to experience many times in coaching, if you want to become a coach, is sometimes you say something and the person has a massive like this. It won't be audible, they won't make noise, but you will see their chest going like this. In most cases, it means they have just accessed some deep emotion. And this is just one of the thousands of examples that is happening around you every day. People are just giving you signals like that all the time. If you miss them, if you're not attentive and pay attention to those signals, you will just never persuade people, and you will just never make them commit to your cause if you want to engage them on some debate, on some political thing, or whatever you want to do. You will just miss the point if you're not attentive to those things. One, for example, funny thing Milton Erickson was discussing is the lip size when a woman knows she wants to be kissed, or maybe she doesn't know but she feels like she wants to be kissed. She has her lower lip going to be flushed, going to be filled with blood, more blood. So when her lower lip is getting thicker, you can know she is kind of enjoying the conversation, at least to some extent. There are many of those things you can measure every day just by discussing, talking with people. And if you want one very simple way of practicing that and developing your acuity, your understanding of those body language signals, all of that, you don't need to memorize all of it. You don't need to pay attention to it every single detail at every second of the day. No. The only thing I would suggest is to at least differentiate if the person is in a good positive state or a bad negative state, and being very aware during your whole day, when do people change? That person you just said hello in the beginning of the day at work, for example, and he or she was in a kind of moody negative state. At one point during the day, he or she is going to be more enjoying the day, kind of more alive and animated on their facial expressions. Just pinpoint when did this happen and why. Always understand when people change from a positive to a negative state, or the reverse, when they change from a negative to a positive state in your everyday conversations, why? In your opinion, why did this happen? And question it. Oh, do you feel better because this or that? Provided it is not a too intrusive topic, unless it is a coaching or a trusted friend. Just question people on your assumptions, because in the beginning when you start, most likely your assumptions are shit because you're not trained enough yet. But when you develop this acuity to question people on what they think, what do they feel, and just with some permissive language, I'm feeling like you have some X or Y, would you say it is the case, or am I mistaken? And at the end, am I mistaken? That way you're not intrusive, you're not like pushy and like trying to nothing, you're just questioning people. This questioning process is really what allowed me to have a crystal clear, really sharp intuition on people, because I have failed so many times at figuring out what they think that by now I'm really aware of what they think. Why do they think this? Why do they feel that? It became really easy for me at this point. Technique number 17, one of the early ones they discovered back in the day, the concept of eye accessing cues. If we come back to neurology experimentations and studies, I do not think anybody else in the scientific world discovered that before Bandler and Grinder. I think Virginia Satir had some understanding of it intuitively, but at least in the scientific background, I could be wrong, mention it in the comments if it is the case. I think nobody else came up with this before them. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions with this model, with those eye accessing cues. So when people have their eyes going up, it is most likely that they think in visually with pictures. When their eyes are going sideways, it is most likely that they are processing some auditory language, or they are maybe listening to something into their own head, some song they heard, or they are just looking for what to say. For example, also when their head is moving like this, it is often because they are saying to themselves something internally and they are not saying it out loud, or they are going to say it out loud but not yet. And when people have their eyes going down right, it is most likely a kinesthetic access, some emotional affect, and when they go down left, it is some inner dialogue. We have often this image of people going even like this. It is most likely because they are talking to themselves. Now, the misconceptions with this model that even John Grinder himself said, so it's not coming from me, it's from John Grinder himself in the book The Origins of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, published in 2016 maybe or 17, around this. He said himself that his only, or like his biggest regret with everything they discovered through NLP was to say that there was one favored sensory channel, meaning that people are supposed to be more visual or more auditory or more kinesthetic. Because during the next decades, everybody started to try to self-analyze themselves and say, oh yeah, I am visual, I am auditory. And in the end, it doesn't even matter in any way. Even if there was such a thing, it doesn't even matter, because you can always switch, and you usually have one favorite sensory channel in one context of life, in one scenario. For example, a musician, when he's playing music, will have access to more auditory signals, or maybe not even, maybe it's purely kinesthetic and they are just remembering in their body when they play music because their sensations are forming the sounds in their head, whatever the cause is, whatever. Just that same person won't have the exact same sensory representations when he or she is talking to his dog because his dog is trying to eat what is on the table. Every situation of life have their own specifics and won't trigger the same processing in your brain. So it doesn't really matter that you are more visual, more auditory. You can always switch. Some people may have more ease. They may have athletes are very often more at ease with kinesthetic processing. People who are drawing or painters are usually more, or like designers are usually have more ease with visual processing. But all those things doesn't mean it is fixed in time. You can always learn new things. So it is okay if you think you have one more sensory channel you use the most, you use more, it's fine. Just don't use that as an excuse to say that you can't learn music or you can't be athletic or whatever it is. You can always learn. Now, this model is more interesting when we come into the idea of reading what people are thinking. It is virtually impossible to really mind read somebody, to really know specifically what they think, which exact words that they say to themselves. But when their eyes are going on the sides, you can question them by saying, how does that sound to you? Instead of saying, what does that look like? If their eyes are looking up, you might tell them, what does it look like when everything becomes clear in your life? And then you will match exactly your language with the processing they have at this moment. For this configuration, this scenario, it is great to be aware of those eye patterns because you can adapt your language. Now, presupposing somebody will only be auditory, only be visual, people are always changing and evolving. So you can decide, you can figure out if somebody is indeed more visual, auditory or whatever at a specific moment. If you have been discussing for 10 minutes with somebody and you see their eyes are constantly going up, then okay, in this moment that person is being only visual or mostly visual in that moment. That doesn't mean this person is only visual into every other moments of their lives. It means they are visual right now, in which case, okay, you can go into visual metaphors, talk more about the crystal clear aspect and how intuitively the horizon is becoming clearer or brighter or is coming closer to their viewpoint. All those visual language, you can use it. Just keep adapting. If they start changing, follow them. Follow what how their brain is processing information, and you will always know what to say to this person to convince them about whatever you want to convince them about. Technique number 18, the sensory predicates, which is kind of the continuity. It is kind of the second part of the last one with the eye accessing cues. This one is just going deeper on the actual body language following all those internal processing. So indeed, the unconscious mind is not really processing direct information. It is processing information through either visual images, either auditory processing, so sounds, voices, how the voice sounds, which words have been used. This one will be obviously very useful when you want to practice sleight of mouth, not on the moment, but when you are developing your skills, when you're practicing sleight of mouth, for example, developing your auditory recognition is of big importance. And kinesthetic, some people who might be like more internally processing, they might be talking kind of more slowly because they are remembering something maybe, and when they have been advancing, people like that who kind of always look down and kind of always are slow, they may be more kinesthetic at this current moment, they may be processing more kinesthetically. So we are going to go through a few of those signals. Same thing, you don't need to know all of them. One thing I had done in the beginning was watching interviews and had some sort of list like that on the side, and was trying to figure out, okay, what kind of processing do they have right now based on their body language, language based on their breathing, at least what I could perceive of their breathing, because sometimes they have a lot of clothes on them, whatever, and then the language they were using, but we will come back to this later. Now it's only about the body language. So how are they breathing, what is their general posture, and again, it's not really about memorizing all of that and always be scanning everybody with every possible detail. It's more about figuring out at which moment does it change. Just really stick that in your mind really abruptly. When do people change and why did they change at this moment? What made them change? Just be aware of when their overall state or brain processing is changing. When are they going from auditory to kinesthetic? When are they going from a very negative state to a very positive one, or at least a lighter, smoother one? Because when you have more awareness of those changes, then you can also paint a picture in your mind of the actual change, the actual state you want to bring them into. And when you have this really clear picture of the state you want to bring them into, so a lighter state maybe, a more enjoyable state, a more rejuvenating state, if you have been seeing and hearing and feeling it on thousands or at least dozens of people in the past 6 months, then it's very easy for you to direct somebody into that state, because you have been aware of what do people look like when they are into an enjoyable state, a lighter state when they put less pressure on themselves. What does it look like from the outside? And having this intuition is really what is going to be formed in your mind, in your habits, once you have been practicing unveiling, discovering, watching carefully how people do behave according to this topic of conversation, to that topic of conversation. How do their state change? How are they changing the way they process what you say? Are they more talkative, less talkative? Are they leaning forward? Are they leaning backward? When you say this, when you ask about this topic or that topic, do they start processing way more up in their visual system? Or when you ask this question, do they go straight auditory, like internal dialogue, like, oh, I never thought about that, and they start mumbling because they're not kind of more in their own heads than with you right now? When you're more aware of that, you will always know what to say next. There won't ever be a case where you're lost and you're like stuck and a manipulator will try to drag you down and you didn't know what to say anymore. Those things won't happen anymore, because you will have too much acuity of what they think, where do they want to get with this argument, this phrase they said, this thing they pointed about your behavior. You will just not be stuck or lost anymore, because you will have too much information on what they are doing inside their head at this specific moment. Technique number 19, NLP strategies. This was the initial thing they tried to develop, or they developed to model behaviors. They were trying to understand what do people do inside their head and how can we codify what happens into the brain of Milton Erickson, of Virginia Satir, of all the people they modeled. How can we codify that so that any kind of student can learn it more easily? Because the problem of experts quite often is that they can't explain as thoroughly as they are doing it. So when they are really good at something, it is very seldom that an expert is capable of deconstructing what he does into very small steps so that a beginner or an intermediate can start copying what they do. So an NLP strategy like the one right here, for example, this one was one our Bandler used in one of his seminars. You are going to deconstruct whatever people do inside their head with visual, auditory, kinesthetic, all of that. Visual, external means that they are seeing something from the outside. Visual internal is inside your head. Auditory external is when you speak. Auditory internal is if you listen to. Stuff like that. Kinesthetic external, I touch something. Kinesthetic internal, I feel something inside. So those kind of things are going to be relevant if you, for example, have somebody in coaching and you want to help your client figuring out what is it about their mental behaviors, their mental habits that keep them stuck? Is it more a voice? Do they say to themselves something? Do they articulate some really negative suggestion or message into their own head? Or is it more something they see? Do they keep seeing themselves failing? Or is it some visual external, for example? Maybe every time they witness their job office or like their car to go to their job, they have a feeling of panic. They are, in that case, visual external, kinesthetic internal, VEKI. It was just a means in the beginning to deconstruct human behaviors in a way that it would be easier to teach it to other people. If you know about NLP modeling, this is kind of the last phase. It is when we have already been able to practice or reproduce internally or physically what the model does, and we want to codify it now with very simple step-by-step processes so that anybody else can learn it in turn. This one right here was one that Bandler used when he figured out why do people have trouble getting up out of bed in the morning, but this can be used for anything, and also with yourself. You can also dissect with yourself whenever you can't do something or you have a trouble to achieve that thing. In your opinion, not just in your opinion, but really put it down on paper. What is the structure, the sequence of what did happen first, what happened next, what happened third, all the things that happened? Just deconstruct them, because then you will be much more aware of your initial triggers. You don't need to change everything about everything that happens in your head when you want to get a better life, but you need to be more aware of the initial steps, the initial triggers that tend to put you in a very negative state. And in the same way, if you have been understanding more thoroughly what do people do inside their head, and you have this specific client or this specific colleague at work who is always trying to push people's buttons because he is very insecure and tries to drag people down because it makes him or her feel more elevated, then you can also pinpoint what is the beginning of that strategy. What is the initial triggers, the initial trigger that makes that person start to lower other people in the office? Is it at the beginning something that this person is seeing that makes him comment in a negative way? Is it something this person is feeling? So for example, every time this person is touching the desk, he's starting to drag people down and tell, "Hey, Mark, did you do this that I asked you yesterday to do?" So you can always pinpoint what was the initial thing that person did, and you can just rephrase, reframe, or not put yourself in the bad situation anymore when you are more aware of what do people are doing around you every day. How do they work? What makes them change? What makes them more attentive? What makes them more positive or more negative about this topic, about yourself, about this or that? Then you will be able to adapt much more easily. And then once if you are a coach, then you can use all that knowledge to better pinpoint people. Okay, you are right now using your inner dialogue to criticize yourself. What if you could, instead of talking to yourself, replace that with a very positive image of your future or of something good you have done in your past that you can feel gratitude about, and test, does it change anything? No? Okay, change again. Instead of this inner dialogue, could you feel something inside? Could you take a couple deep breaths every time you start to talk to yourself, and then replace that internal dialogue by a song from the outside that you play, or a song you can hear in your own head, and therefore auditory internal still, but something else. As long as you keep changing the strategies like that, you will always find a solution to get out of the trapped, stuck state people put themselves into all day long, and that you may be putting yourself into all day long eventually too. Technique number 20, we are going to get now into the actual language, presuppositions, and figuring out language, which I know you guys love about, because then you can use conversational hypnosis, sleight of mouth, and use all those tricky languages to make people do what you want them to do, either buy something or either join you into your bedroom or whatever you want to do with people around you right now. You can just figure out the language people use, what is hidden behind the language they use, what presuppositions, beliefs are hidden behind the state they are into at this current moment. If they are like closed and like this, what kind of belief brought them there? And you can figure that out very easily by questioning slightly. We will get back on questioning on the third part of this video. Technique number 20, frames of reference. What I mean by that is, Whenever people talk, you can just have a grasp or figure out clearly or listen for which frame, which role do they assume of having at this current moment during the interaction. One of the most classical examples is if you talk to a police officer, obviously that person has power over you. That person has more authority over you just because of social roles. When that person doesn't have his uniform anymore, he may not have superiority over you anymore. But in that context, he does have it by social standards. In that scenario, it is normal. But in many scenarios, actually in most cases of life, people just assume they have a role in a conversation that is just subjective. It is not based on truth, it is just subjective. Manipulators may may think they are superior to you. On the contrary, some people may keep lowering themselves down. If you are someone, or if you have seen someone with very low self-esteem, or like low self-confidence, or they think they have low self-confidence or self-esteem, they may always justify themselves, always try to prove themselves. And this is basically a frame of reference. Which role do they assume of having in this current environment, in this interaction? When you have a clear grasp of frames of reference, it is way easier to apply frame control to control the frame of the conversation, because you know the base ground foundation, you know what the person is assuming. If you don't understand what the person is assuming, it might be twice harder to use the right language patterns or to persuade that person or to get out of the frame, because you don't even know which game you're playing. If you don't know which role the person is unconsciously assuming to have over you or lower than you, if it is somebody that you want to elevate, you're a coach and you want to make that person more confident, but whatever you say, just because, for example, a woman who I had clients like this, women who have been growing up into very oppressive families with like a Christian dad, not criticizing Christianity, but this family was like really on the religious aspect, like really oppressive, and like women have to stay at home and whatever. Actually, any kind of religion, it doesn't matter if it is Christianity or anything else, just any kind, where the dad might have been like really oppressive, and the girl in that family might always feel like she's lower than everyone. And I had some clients like this, some women were like, whatever I was saying, because I was the man, they were always like diminishing themselves and not clearly answering, because they thought they had to appear nice. So I understood that. I clearly understood, okay, she is constantly dragging herself down. Now, what can I say to make her get out of that negative trance? To make her get out of this and start grounding herself and feeling like she is a grown adult, which she was at this point, and getting more confident about saying the things that she needs to say. If you don't understand which frame people are obeying to unconsciously, it will be very tough to get them out of it or get yourself out of it if they're trying to put a frame on you, frame control. You first need to understand this. In coaching or in life in general, 3 frames you are going to encounter all the time is number 1, the problem frame. So whenever people keep trying to evaluate what is wrong, they just try to find the fault. In political debates, not among politicians, but people who like to talk about politics and who are not even politicians themselves, we see that a lot. It's always whose fault it is. They are not even trying to find a solution, they just want to blame somebody, the blame thing. On the opposite, if you use frame control, specifically if you're a coach, the right frame to get out of this is the outcome frame. What's the outcome? You kept criticizing this person, or you kept criticizing my behaviors, or you kept criticizing that your dad or school or whoever bullied you is the fault, is the result. Where do we go from there? What do you want from that? And this question alone is already breaking the frame and applying frame control. Then the person might resist and come back with limiting beliefs, in which case sleight of mouth, conversational hypnosis, we will get back on this on the third part. You can just change their beliefs. In the beginning, evaluate in which new frame you want to bring them into. If you try to argue with somebody while staying into their frame, you lost anyway. The beginning, which is more a cognitive process, and this thing may not have to be done consciously, really fast. You are going to change it naturally just by figuring out how do I reframe this or that belief, but at least understanding which frame the person is coming up from is of utter importance in my opinion. So for example here the outcome frame, so where do we go from there? Okay, you have been betrayed, you have been hurt, blah 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 blah, those people are wrong, yeah, okay, they are wrong. Where do we go from there? What's the next step? Do you just want to still complain for the next 10 years, or do you want to go somewhere? If you want to go somewhere, where? Tell me what it is. And then we can see if there is any solution, and if there's not any, we can build it. But just staying on the complaining cycle will not solve anything. And most people, not even in politics, just in politics, but in most cases in life, I think, just staying into the blame problem frame forever because they want to complain, never do anything else. The second one I like to pinpoint is the failure frame. Something like I was not good enough, I couldn't succeed, or like those people, the team failed. And we can switch that into the feedback frame. So it is one of the most known at this point presuppositions from the NLP methodology. It was not a failure, it was a learning experience. This one may be easy to say just like that, and if I say that, you're like, oh yeah, of course, it's just experience. Yeah, but 90% of people I heard saying that were not applying it to themselves. Not at all. They knew about it consciously, but they were never applying it to themselves. Even if they knew that every failure is only a feedback, they were still dragging themselves down into the gutter non-stop because they failed at something. So it's good to know about it, but the question, same thing with the outcome, what are you doing to get out of it? What is the next step? What is the next thing you want to get? And what is the solution to get out of this? Just staying into describing the failure and why did it fail is most likely not going to help anybody getting out of it. It may help not doing the same mistake again, eventually, but it won't help you to get out of it at this current moment in time. And the third one, the impossibility frame. So this one is going to come very often back to limiting beliefs and how limiting beliefs are being structured. Impossibility frame, I can't succeed, I won't succeed because I have always failed in the past. I will always keep failing and it's impossible for me to change, or I don't see any light to get out of this tunnel, this dark tunnel. And the classical frame to get out of this is the as-if frame, which is an echo to the meta model. We will get back on this on the third part, the meta model, where you want to point people toward the future of what if there was a solution, what if there was a way out of it. So what if you could? What if it was already done? If you had already found a solution? Right here I am transitioning into language patterns already, but it's like this, those two last techniques are like the transition into the last part, which is language techniques. So what if you could actually change? And whenever people get themselves stuck into impossibility with I won't, it's impossible, nobody has ever been able to achieve that, what if you could become the first one to achieve that? What if you could lead yourself into the situation where you can tell everybody that you have become number one to succeed at this? What would it look like? And every time you hear people complaining like that, you can just pinpoint it to them, not in a destructive, manipulative, mean way. You don't need to break people to make them change. Just understand where do you want to lead them. And the more you play that game with yourself and with people, and the less problems will remain problems in your life because you will automatically find the right solutions to solve them. And technique number 21, which this time is really getting into the language aspect of figuring out people, linguistic presuppositions. We could talk for 10 hours about this alone because there are so many distinctions into how people can presuppose things in their language. I will just say pretty simple here. 3 basic examples. Hypnosis never worked on me. If I join this course, the same result will happen again. I spent the whole day cleaning the house. Why can't you notice it? In all those phrases, there are hidden messages behind it. Into presuppositions, you don't need to figure out every possible each of them every time somebody is enumerating a limitation or something they are pissed off or angry about. You just need to figure out the main one that is preventing your outcome with them from happening. So, very classical. Hypnosis never worked on me, and I am the hypnotist. I want to explain to this person that yes, hypnosis does work, but they are stuck-minded because it never worked on them. The presupposition is I have tried hypnosis before it went bad. If I don't clarify that, if I don't take some time to enumerate what did happen to you, if you are the one telling me hypnosis never worked on me, if I try right away to go into argumentation, oh, I can assure you it works because in scientific studies they have assertively proved that, it won't do anything because you haven't actually got into the reason for why this person doesn't like it. The reason is personal and you need to question it. So hearing the presupposition is what allows you to question effectively the person on what do they need to hear, to what do you need to unveil the actual hurt, the hurt feeling, the bad negative thing that happened to them. If I don't clarify the reason why hypnosis failed according to them in the past, then whatever I say is going to be ignored because I haven't been uncovering the actual real source of the problem. Next one, if I join this course, the same result will happen again. Presupposition, something negative happened with the last one. Same thing with hypnosis. If I don't clarify what happened, if I don't question the person, and if I have already seen the same profile 10 times, maybe I already know what the actual problem is. Or maybe if I know the person and I have been talking with that person for 1 hour, maybe I kind of intuitively already know what it's about. But in any case, question it, make sure you are talking about the right thing. If you ignore the actual reason for why this person is being stuck, why this person is having a very negative perception of your service or whatever you want to talk about, if you don't elaborate, clarify that, anything you say will be ignored, or in the best case scenario, they will listen to you, but then they will just come back to their opinion the next day because you haven't really digged into the real source of their problem, of their limitation, of their negative perception of what you're talking about. And the last one, I spent the whole day cleaning the house. Why can't you notice it? Presupposition, you don't take care about how I feel. Any person in a relationship knows that when the partner is complaining about trivial things, it is never really about the trivial things, it is about some deeper problem. Usually, for example, here it might be, you didn't take me to the restaurant, whereas you told me you would, and then we didn't talk about it again. So now the cleaning the house is just a smokescreen. It is just an excuse to unveil the actual hurt feeling that happened because you didn't take me to the restaurant. For example, there might be 1,000 different reasons, but just you need to dig deeper into those reasons, those assumptions, without which any kind of argumentation, sleight of mouth, reframing, beliefs change, it won't do anything because you're not getting into the core, the reason for why people are pissed off or angry or they don't like it or whatever. Next, we can talk about, from all the presuppositions into language, there are presuppositions about time, about absoluteness, about possibility and impossibility. All those frames, all those matters of life have certain adverbs and adjectives matching them. Here we are going to study 2 of them. We don't need to go through all of it. Maybe I will do other videos on that, but same thing, it would take like 5 hours if I had to give every possible presupposition in language that can exist, without even counting that in some languages like German or English, or then in French, and then in Chinese, there might be even different subtleties into the presuppositions. So let's keep it simple here. One that you are going to uncover pretty often if you're a coach is the language of permanence versus the language of temporary. So if a client comes in and talks about his problem as something permanent, like lasting, enduring, persistent, difficult to release, continuing, so this continuing fear I have of dogs, It has been lasting for years. Every time I try to approach a dog, this persistent problem just keeps me down, and it's constantly making me feel like I will never get out of it. All this language is permanence. When you have succeeded at making your client change or helping your client to change, he or she will start to talk about his problem with the language of temporary lexical field. So fleeting, transient, changing, vanishing, momentarily. Evaporates. Oh, I feel like my fear is starting to evaporate. Whenever they start to articulate their problem with a different lexical field, it means you have made them change, or the change started. So this is more about auditory recognition, coming back to this whole section, state awareness, being aware of their language, what is hidden behind their language, and more the structure of their language, more than the content of the experience. It doesn't matter that he is afraid of dogs, of cats, of crocodiles, of the TV, of Pennywise in the movie It. Whatever it is, what you want to figure out is what is the lexical field for this right here, linguistic presuppositions. Which lexical field are they using to describe the problem? Is it the lexical field of impossibility, of childish behaviors, of permanence and whatever? And as soon as they start changing this lexical field, it means you have hit something and you really need to stay at that moment on the same suggestion or topic or metaphor you have just been using, because you know you are on a hot topic, you are on a hot thing right here. Whenever people start to shift their perception of what is dragging them down, of what is bugging them, then you know something is changing. So some people will be more at ease with noticing the body language. Visually, they can notice the breathing more easily. It may not be your case, but maybe you are more attuned with auditory recognition. Maybe when people talk about impossibility versus temporary fleeting feelings, you are very attuned to notice, oh, you said something different right here. If you're the kind of person to always be very clear and very specific on what people said, and you always remember very clearly what people said, it resonates in your head with which nouns, which verbs they used, then you might be more aware of this more easily than the whole breathing and reading the eye patterns. It may be not the best thing for you, but maybe auditory recognition, tough to say, is easier for you. On the reverse, you might be completely like it's nonsense, impossible to understand thing to figure out those language trickery, but maybe you are just visually more aware of when their eyes are going wider and slighter. Maybe whatever it is, just start with what you're the most at ease with and build from what you are the most at ease with. No need to figure out every possible NLP techniques out there. Start with what you have, and then you will do miracles with that. One last thing about those presuppositions linguistically, people will usually all the time make unconscious links between this and that, between left wing or right wing and this bad thing. People always like to make links like that because it is how the unconscious mind is simplifying, or the conscious mind is simplifying the raw information that the world is sending us all the time. We delete information, as you know about if you have read the book The Structure of Magic, or even anything about the meta model. We just delete information. So to delete those informations, our minds like to create links that are basically simplifying the work for us. Which means sometimes we are creating negative links. Whenever people say which means, because of that, because every time because you did that, I did this. Those are unconscious links. And whenever those links happen, that you can hear some of those links, you know you just arrived on the limiting belief, on the presupposition. And those presuppositions are the ones you need to question, to pinpoint, to clarify. What do you mean by that? We will get back on this on the next section. Just be aware of whenever people make links and jump right away to conclusions. What made them believe that this was true? And by sharpening your understanding of this, you can very easily pinpoint their own bullshit, their own limitations, and help them change them the same way you can help yourself to change too. Part number 3, finally, when we are going to get into the actual language techniques, how do you persuade and influence people? The whole field of conversational hypnosis or sleight of mouth or hypnotic language patterns. In the end, all those terms are just the same thing. It is about how do you use words in a clever way so that the suggestion you are giving is bypassing the conscious defenses of the person in front of you instead of brutally attacking the person head on. Sometimes attacking somebody head on, verbally speaking, might be an interesting strategy, but in many cases when people are arguing against you or have some mental blocks, it is much more efficient to bypass their barriers and caress their defenses instead of trying to break them. Because sometimes even if you successfully break somebody, they may hate you forever if you have been doing that. Whereas when you bypass their defenses and convince them without forcing, not only will you have been helping them or helped them to change, and on top of that, they will still see you in a positive light. Therefore, technique number 22, we are going to talk about elicitation, or the skill of gathering information. Any kind of verbal conflict or persuasion situation where you have to influence people will most likely start by you gathering as much information as possible from your interlocutor. You want to have the ground, the foundation of what is happening inside their own head. The last part about state awareness was already discussing that component, that fact, and now we are going to dive deeper into what specifically do you ask people so that you have the quality information you need to figure out what to say to reframe their limiting belief or help them to unveil their past trauma or whatever happened. If you don't have much ideas about how to do that, it is basically the first part of building rapport. When you start building rapport with somebody, if you already have massive rapport and they see you as a source of authority, you can just skip that part right away. But if people don't know you yet and they don't know who you are and they don't really know if they can trust you or not, the beginning is easier if you start by questioning them on their deep motives, on the reasons they are doing this or that, why do they think they need such help or whatever. For example, a question like, what is important to you about X or Y? What is the most important to you about your job? If you come in a therapy session and the biggest problem is your job, then what is it that is important to you about your job? And if the answer is nothing, then why the hell are you still there? And then we can get deeper on the problem instead of just giving some crappy solutions like, now put a smile at the work in your office and then you will be happy. Doesn't work for anyone to give that kind of really crappy advice. What works is to question people more deeply on the reasons for why they are doing such or such things. And at some point you will just get on the actual block, the actual blockage or limitation, the thing that prevents them from changing what is bothering them. So questions like, what is the most important to you about X? You are eliciting the criteria, the value behind, or most likely the criteria behind what it is that is blocking them. And by questioning then, how do you know you have achieved that? So if they say the most important thing for me at my job is that I have mental freedom, okay, then how do you know when you have mental freedom? And how do you know when you don't have mental freedom? What is the difference? You need some comparison to figure out where to go from there. Again, problem frame, outcome frame. You want to get to the direction to know where to go. So questions like, how will you know when you will have achieved that? What is the most important thing for you about X? How do you know when X or Y will be achieved? Can you describe an event when you experienced this thing you are looking for? If you want more freedom in your life, or if you want to be more understood, or if you want to feel some more connection because you're feeling lonely, then can you describe an event when you actually felt connected, surrounded, understood by people around you? Or can you describe an event where you felt the freedom you are going after, the kind of freedom you want to see more of in your life right now. And the more of those elements you get from your client or the person you are discussing with, the easier it will be to find the right information so that you can persuade them or help them to change. One last interesting question into this information gathering aspect is, how do you feel about that? Or what do you think about that? Specifically, if you talk about a kind of very sensitive topic and you don't know really where are the boundaries of the person in front of you, you may start by, what is your opinion on that? I'm interested. What is your opinion on this, that matter? And then you will know where not to go. If it is kind of a sensitive, tough topic, you will know what is the limit, because the person will just enumerate it for you. If you ask how do you feel about this? What is your opinion about that? Then you can know how to articulate your language with what the person just said. Technique number 23, the infamous matching and mirroring or synchronization, synchronize, pace somebody. This is another of those very misunderstood aspects of NLP. Even if this one doesn't belong to NLP, it was used in communication skills way before. I guess in intelligence services, they already knew about that for decades and decades, even before NLP comes to birth. And people just use that intuitively. Pacing somebody, matching what they do on the nonverbal aspect of it. If you sit like this, maybe I will sit like this too, just to match and mirror what you're doing. Any kind of language I might use might also be a way to pace you. You may not mirror somebody on the nonverbal aspect, but you may mirror somebody on the kind of language you are using. We are going to come back on this on the verbal predicates and sensory language with visual, auditory, all of that. But the very misunderstood part of matching and mirroring is to think that it's all about purely physical mirroring. It's not. And in movies, when this thing is really going over the edge because they are making fun of those NLP things, it's because people think that it's just about the physical aspect of, oh, they sit like that, so I have to sit like that, or I can do a cross-matching, a cross-mirroring, where I do the other way around, and now I'm clever because he did not see it. No, people just grasp it, okay? There's nothing clever about just doing the other side. The thing with mirroring, it is going to happen automatically when you really pay attention to the person in front of you. When you really have a sincere desire to help, this whole matching and mirroring is going to happen naturally. Think about you and your best friend, or just look people in the restaurant and notice how their position, if there is like one person, just notice their body position. Are they in the really same kind of stance? Are they both like this? Are they both like that? Do they have their legs touching each other? Do they have their legs completely like below the chair and like completely drawn back? What is the posture? You can very easily notice when people have the same overall body posture, or maybe the same tone of voice. It doesn't always have to be about just matching the body posture. It can be the voice tonality when people speak in a very elevated way. Maybe you can adapt your tonality, or maybe if they speak much more slowly, you can spend a few minutes to speak at the same rate with the same tempo. There is a million ways to match the way people are behaving. Beginners in NLP often put a lot of pressure on themselves because they can't see the breathing. They're not trained enough to see the breathing and to match the breathing patterns. You don't need to if it is too complex for you. Matching the kind of language the person is using, or matching the number of blinking they have per minute, you have many ways of matching somebody, and in the end it doesn't really matter as long as the person is giving you the information you need. If whenever you ask a question, people are just answering you with the most detailed answers ever, then you are in rapport. You already have it. You don't need to push more and to keep synchronizing. This is interesting to match like this and overdo the pacing, the matching and mirroring. If really you have a cold ice block in front of you that is not saying anything, then yes, then it could be interesting to actually overdo the matching the body posture and talk softly and don't be too intrusive. And at some point the person is going to ease up and open more and talk more about the things you want them to talk about. If people are already very talkative and tell you all the things you want to know, then just to go straight into what you want out of them or where you want to bring them. Just ask them very direct questions. If people are already answering you and responding positively, boom, right away. Now, for the actual language aspects of it, first of all, on the pure matching and mirroring, before getting into advanced language patterns, I would like to discuss some of those auditory or visual, auditory kinesthetic language predicates that you can use, you can infuse your language with when you have spotted, when you have sensed, when you have noticed, caught that the person was using some more auditory language or visual or kinesthetic. So words like appear, brighter, colorful, clearly, disappearing, farsighted, foresee, focus. All of this is the lexical field of the visual person. Auditory, audible, babble, boisterous, buzz, discord, droning, earshot, echo, hear, hiss, listen, muffled, murmuring. You can just infuse more of those words into your language, into the phrases you are building, into the suggestions you are saying. If people have been more responsive maybe to this kind of language. Maybe whenever you talk about what people said, the person you're talking to is like, yes, because they are more attentive to auditory things. When you tell a story, some people will be much more attentive to visual pictures, in which case you can just paint the bright and colorful future they might have for themselves. When people are more kinesthetic, you can start talking more into this cold, firm truth that has to be told, because when people have been hustling hard their whole life, they don't need to be impressed by anybody anymore, and they can just inventing some whatever phrase right now, and they can have feel this soft sense that they have finally relieved themselves and that they can move forward. Pure kinesthetic. You can always adapt your language like this. Again, if it is something that seems completely outrageously difficult for you, don't start there. Start with what seems like very easy for you and build momentum. And then you can come back to this later if you really need, if you really feel like, or it seems like you don't have enough vocabulary and you can't construct proper metaphors or suggestions or anything, then you may come back to this to enrich your vocabulary. In the very beginning, it is not necessary to overdo, to overcomplexify. Just pick the one NLP technique that really seems intuitive for you and work on that one. Then get another one and work on this one, etc. until you reach full mastery. Technique number 24, pacing and leading. So we have been talking about just matching and mirroring on the pure building rapport level. Now, how do you actually lead somebody into something new? The techniques we are going to see with the Milton model, with sleight of mouth, and with the language predicates we saw in the last technique are all about using the right language to lead somebody's mind into a new direction. But the overall structure of pacing and leading, when you need to get someone from the state that they are currently into a new state, a new, more positive state usually. The basic structure right here is to start by only matching and mirroring. So with the techniques we have been seeing on the last 2 or 3 techniques. And then you pace, and you are going to finally lead somebody. Then you pace, and then lead. And at some point you only lead because the person is already trusting you, or you are being seen as a source of authority, and whatever you say is being accepted by their unconscious mind. This is kind of the overall structure. The idea that you start by pacing, and then slowly you mix pacing with leading, and at some point when you have full rapport, you only lead the person, unless there is some new added resistance, in which case you come back into some more pacing, matching, and as soon as they are more responsive, more responding to your suggestions, whenever you say something, you can see them being more animated. That means their unconscious mind has rapport with you, or that you are in sync with their unconscious mind, and then you can just go back into lead with new suggestions, new stories, new metaphors to lead their mind covertly, whatever it is. This is the overall structure. Then obviously in a real conversation it is never going to be that clear. It is going to go like back and forth. Again, if you want to summarize and simplify this to the strict minimum, it is only about Are they in a positive state right now, or are they in a negative state? If you think for yourself about somebody you have seen being in a very negative state and somebody you have seen being experiencing a very positive state, you have a clear representation of the differences between both. Now, it can be really easy whenever you are talking with somebody new, somebody else, a client, somebody you want to date, whatever, a client you want to sell something to, or a client in therapy you want to help, whatever. It is all about, are they right now at this current moment of their life and of my life, are they in a positive state or not? If they are in a negative state, then how can I pace match their body language or their behavior or their language predicates? If they speak visually or if they speak kinesthetically because they feel down and they have this weight in the chest, then can I just use a bit the same posture as I talk to them? Or can I just tell the story of when sometimes in my life I had the same thing happening and I keep my head in the same position as them when I'm discussing that, and then slowly I will move and I will see if they move with me. Because if they do move with me, that means I am in rapport with them. If they don't move at all, I may need some more rapport building, maybe questioning them some more, go back to information gathering, technique 22, I think, come back to understanding more of their problem, getting deeper into the problem, and show appreciation. Never judge, show appreciation for all the struggles they've had so far, all the things they had to face, and slowly move toward the solution. Some phrases you may use when you want to pace and lead in just one sentence. For example, when the person is having some resistance and you want to suggest something, but saying it too directly might cause even more resistance. So some phrases for that matter are, for example, I agree about X or Y. It is true that people who have been facing a difficult job when they were young still have scars of being betrayed or manipulated at work. It is true that. Of course you can. Of course you can just complain about the people who betrayed you, and what I would suggest you is to blah blah blah, then you suggest whatever you want. If they are visual, and I would suggest you, if you allow me, to start seeing a more positive light into the future you can build from now. Starting from a pacing statement. Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can complain about that, and what I suggest is X or Y. The first time I heard about this, I didn't like it neither. This one is really to pace, soften people who are kind of really like holding something negative and they don't want to let it go. You can say, the first time I heard about this, the first time I heard about NLP, I definitely didn't believe in it. Not at all. Or as it is the case, but you can say, if it is somebody who is like kind of reluctant with NLP, you can start pacing their limitation with, the first time I heard about this, I really didn't like it. I thought all those people were manipulative, they were evil, and there is only one thing that made me change my mind. Would you like to know what it was? And then you have opened the loop, and then you can insert whatever embedded command you want, because you have caught their attention and you have paced their limitation. You have paced the thing they were tense and angry about. And once you ease down those resistance, then it can be really easy to get into the suggestion you want their unconscious mind to accept. Another one is nobody asks you, or nobody is asking you to change your mind right away. What I would like to know about you is... And then boom, same thing. You can just gather more information without pressuring them, without forcing. Last one, would you say you want to find some clarity? And this one is more a rhetorical question. You can use a lot of rhetorical questions when you want to build more rapport with people, or same thing, ease down their limitation, their struggles, the things they are struggling with. Would you say it is pretty tough to endure the life conditions you have right now? And they will say, oh yeah, of course, because it is so hard, because this and this. And then you get more information, and the more information you get, the easier it is to find the right language pattern to exactly convince them about whatever you want them to acquire as a positive change. Technique number 25, the meta model. And this was the original model they invented with their studies of what would become neuro-linguistic programming later. They just found out, Bandler and Grinder, that all the great therapists in the world, at least the ones they modeled, were using the same kind of language structure. On purpose, I simplifying here the model to only this, that I think is showing only what is necessary from that model, and I think many things are not essential. All those lack of referential index, I think those things are very interesting when you study language, but I don't think they are essential when you want to use the core components, the core value of what the meta model is with somebody. This is my personal simplified version of it. So you just start with the middle square when you want to understand a meta model and use it. You just start by the middle square right here. People will always come up with limitations, limiting beliefs, and arguments that take the form of a cause and effect structure. If you remember in one previous technique, I told you be really careful whenever people have those causalities into their head about which means that because this, because of that, I need to blah blah blah. Whenever people make links like that in their head, they are trapping themselves into problems, into difficult situations. So the very beginning is to ask how do you know that? Whenever people mention result is like a negative effect, a negative sensation, I feel down, I feel stressed out, I am always stressed, how do you know that? And you will get the initial cause they find for themselves. Now you have the cause and effect, you can work. If you have only partial information, it can be very difficult to help them successfully. But once you have the clear structure of the cause and effect that happened inside their head, their mind just created a link between one situation and one very negative sensation, or a feeling of being paralyzed, or anything that is really difficult and problematic. Once you have the clear structure of both, it is very easy, it is way easier to work with them. From there, once you have the how do you know that, and they will give you the meaning behind the cause they attribute to their feeling of pain, to their the people leaving them, to them feeling being isolated. You want to get the cause, and once you have that, you can go into any of the other directions. So the most common, or what prevents you from, what would happen if, those are model operators. All the questions you need to ask if people have in their phrase, in their belief, any sort of I can't, it's impossible, because I need to, because I'm forced to, because I'm pushed to do this, because people want me to do this. Whenever you have those causalities, you can just ask, okay, if it is I can't, what prevents you from doing it? If it is I need to keep hustling, I need to keep working hard, what forces you, or what would happen if you stopped? What would happen if you stopped working that hard? What would happen if you stopped putting so much pressure on yourself? What would happen if you stopped making yourself feel that lonely? What would happen if you stopped pushing people away whenever they want to talk with you in a more meaningful way? Or what prevents you from deleting that person from your life? I can't get rid of this negative person. What prevents you from getting rid of them? When you ask those questions, you are going to go way deeper, and if you already have a lot of rapport, maybe one of those questions alone is already going to provoke a massive shift in people. If you don't have much rapport yet, or if you just start discussing, those questions will most likely lead to something deeper. Which in the same way, you ask, how do you know that? So I can't get rid of this negative person. What prevents you? For example, because we have a common history together. Okay, so the cause is we have a common history together, therefore I need to stay in pain with that person. Same thing. What would happen if you stopped putting so much pain on yourself when being around that person? What would happen? And then you can just play with the person's mind non-stop like this. The other squares, how does this mean that? This one is more to challenge the link between those two. So whenever I am at work, I feel pressured and stressed out. How can you being at work means that you feel so stressed out? How is this happening? And then the same thing, they will give you a reason, the criteria, maybe possibly one very negative experience that happened 6 months ago or 1 year ago, or even in their childhood maybe. And same thing, you can go back on the loop whenever you started again. So because 6 months ago people joked about me in the office, and now they always make fun of me. What would happen if they stopped? What would happen if they were not making fun of you anymore? And what would make them stop? What would make people stop making so much fun of you? Or how can you being in the office makes people have fun about you? What is it about your behavior or about whatever you do that allows them to joke so much about you, to be mean with you, to be bad with you, to have negative comments about you? What forces them and what prevents you from telling them once and for all, or what prevents you from finding a way to end this forever? Of course, those questions sometimes may irritate people because they may feel like triggered and like, oh, you don't understand me. And same thing, whenever they get triggered and like angry, just go back to matching and mirroring. Okay, fine. Tell me more about this. What do you feel? How do you feel about this? And what is important to you about your job? Get deeper on the source of the anger, because the more you unveil all those blocked emotions, the more people will feel free. They will feel like they have unloaded something very difficult, very heavy to bear, and then they will feel more free, and them feeling more free is usually what will make them find solutions by themselves on their own. But your job here, when it is in therapy, is also to help them unload all those things they have been keeping stuck for like maybe years and years and years. In a more confrontational way, this model will still be used, but I would just keep as much rapport as possible, because those questions can really unveil extremely traumatic things. When you ask those questions nonstop, people can start to get in touch with something extremely painful about themselves. And if you go like a jackhair, like nonstop pushing on their limitations, they will just leave you alone. They will just leave the room and they won't even want to talk to you anymore. And that doesn't mean they have been helped. It just means you are a douchebag. So be careful with this. Don't ask, too intrusive, too violent way. Slow down, take time with people. And the last one is, how does this work? So when people have a word like feeling stressed, so how does stress work? Or I just don't want to go out of the house anymore. I just don't want to go back to normal life because of shame. Shame is a noun. How does shame work? Can you tell me more about what makes shame happen? How is it possible that shame exists in somebody and not in somebody else? And then same thing, you will unveil more and more of all those things. So you don't need to have a very specific step-by-step structure of like first this question, then this one. It is just practice with a friend, practice with somebody, or just take one of those patterns, one of them, and practice it in your normal conversations. Your job is to use that question in as many conversations as possible, and then notice what you get, which response, which answer do you get from it. Always do it with a positive intention behind. Finally, some questions that can help you about the meta model. If this model was like still too confusing for you, just write down the set of 7 questions I'm going to say right now. Who are you talking about specifically? What are you talking about specifically? Do you have a specific example of that? How do you know that? How or where did you learn about this? What prevents it from being possible? What prevents you from accomplishing this? And 7, what do you mean by that? Those are 7 questions. You can just have them somewhere printed and just use them whenever somebody is feeling blocked about something in their life, and you will always come toward a solution with those questions. Technique number 26, the Milton model. So with the meta model, we were going more specific downward and we want to gather more specific information about the people. Milton model is going to go upward on the more vague aspect, because you are going to speak in a more vague way so that people feel more of their own internal representations on what you say, and they will convince themselves on their own by filling up the gaps into what you say. A phrase, for example, like follow the path and the path will follow you. Path is an abstract noun. There is no clear evidence of what this is. Following, how? Following like with legs? Following like with a wheelbarrow? How is it going to follow? But phrases like that, follow the path and the path will follow you are very abstract phrases. They are vague suggestions that people will need to fill the gaps into all those missing information into the phrase. They will fill the gaps with whatever connects the dots into their own head, and they will make meaning out of what you say just by you saying that. Again, it works if you are in rapport with the person. If somebody doesn't want to listen to you, that's most likely gonna end up into, what are you talking about? They're not really going to be responsive to this. So the Milton model is about suggesting things instead of forcing them, which is the goal of any kind of skillful persuasion. It is more about caressing the resistance and inducing a message instead of trying to force people to obey by violent means. Same thing as with the MED model. I think the Milton model has like 18 or 24 distinctions into it. A lot of them are, in my opinion, not essential. You can learn them if you like, if you really want to have all the distinctions of presuppositions, all those rhetorical questions, all those tag questions. If you want to study everything, do it. But from my experience, the problem of people in NLP is not really that they need to figure out all the techniques. Their problem is, how do I chunk down and simplify to only what is needed right now? So on purpose, I'm going to shrink the model to very simple things. The first one, I think, is that is really a good example of the Milton model in general is embedded questions. So an embedded question is, for example, I'm wondering if you are understanding, I'm wondering if you are getting a lot of value from that video. I'm wondering if, and I am actually asking a question to your unconscious mind because I have enumerated a question, but I didn't ask you to answer it right away. So even if you don't answer it consciously, there's a part of your brain that is just answering it just to make sense of what I just said. So all those ways of communicating that Milton Erickson was a genius of, and that's why it is called the Milton model, all those ways and means are used to bypass the conscious defenses by you restructuring your sentences. So I'm wondering if, or somebody the other day asked me if there was a way to teach NLP through videos in a way that people start using it right away. And I'm still wondering if it is possible that people start to find ways into their own life by which they can actually start using language patterns very easily by themselves on their own with the next person they're going to meet. So it's infused with a lot of suggestions about you going to be able to use all of that right away. But I'm not forcing, I'm not telling you, now I want you, you should do. No, I'm just talking about what I learned recently. But having those messages will help your unconscious mind to grasp all the things much more easily than if I just give you a list of bullet points of now do this, now do that, or like a 6 month program, and after the first 2 weeks everybody is gone because nobody really follows upon when they're by themselves. Whereas those suggestions, they will grow into your mind, they will flourish, and then you will actually start using some of the stuff sometimes without even realizing it, just because you have been programmed, neuro-linguistic programming. So embedded questions is one great way of explaining the Milton model. I'm not going to give you all the distinctions because I think it's irrelevant and it's just confusing people to try to figure out everything. I'm more giving you the overall principles, and then you can use any of the techniques that you find online because you will have grasped all the principles much more easily. The other one I like to discuss is the quotes, which is quoting somebody. So my friend told me, or somebody else told me, or when I learned NLP, my teacher told me, or when I learned hypnosis, the teacher told all of us that the day we start using those techniques for very simple matters, actually our unconscious mind will start to connect to the dots and make people change even without trying to make them change. Suggestion. And did my teacher actually told me this? No. But just quoting somebody else is also bypassing a lot of resistance, because if it is you and me, me and you, already confusing, me and you, then you might say, oh, I'm just a random nobody, why would you listen? But if I quote a source of authority, oh, when I read a book by Milton Erickson, he was explaining how all those unconscious mechanisms can help you to build the business of your dreams, and that with all this unconscious imprint, you will actually find solutions you never thought about. Did Milton Erickson ever said that? No. Not that I know of. But just me quoting somebody else, even more if it is a source of authority that you respect, probably if you are watching this video, you know who it is, who is it about, then quoting somebody else will bypass many filters, many conscious blockages, because it is not me directly. I am bypassing this filter of, oh, I'm just a random nobody. I am. But if I'm quoting somebody that you respect, then whatever I say is going to be respected by your unconscious mind. So whether it is a quote, quoting somebody, or using embedded questions, or using verbal predicates, whatever you take, any kind of suggestion form you take, most likely you are using embedded commands, which is a big part of the Milton model. I would argue that it is even the main thing you have to figure out besides understanding the vague, bypassing, caressing the mind of the person without forcing. This is more a principle than a technique, and quotes and embedded questions are techniques that are taken from that principle. Now, besides that, embedded commands, they are really the dart. They are, when you play darts, you play with those darts and you want to hit a target. And the embedded commands you use are those darts, and they will really hit right. Embedded commands or any kind of state, for example, you have it right here. You just want to use an action verb with a state or an action. So action verbs are like realize, imagine, understand, change, discover, begin to, succeed, transform. Any kind of verb that will make the person think. Think about something, even if you don't command them to think, but using one of those words into your sentence will make them picture or experience the thing you are talking about just by you using one of those words. We will get back on those two later, but just to come back slightly on the embedded command structure. So you have here the structure that takes any kind of suggestion. Usually you lead people toward positive states, toward solution. So when we talk about a state or an action, it is most likely going to be something about feeling more positive, finding solutions for yourself, getting more clarity about your life. All those kinds of really very normal suggestions. You will feel happier in the bedroom with your wife. Whatever is the suggestion or the state or the action, it is going to end up with something like that. And to precede this action or state, you use an action verb, which is imagine, realize. So can you start to realize how happier you will be when you will finally have the date you wanted, when you will have finally gathered the confidence you were looking for, so that you can approach the person of your dreams. Feeling the confidence growing. Can you imagine what it will be like when you finally grow the confidence you always needed? So imagine, activation verb, grow the confidence, state or action, to approach people, action. It is kind of always going to have this structure. Now, when we want to summarize the Milton model language, same thing. There would be like maybe 1,500 words in the Milton model language, maybe even way more. I'm just reducing to something simple you can use right away. Temporal predicates, before, after, when. So you can replace this with the quote or with the embedded question. It is just something to pre-frame the suggestion. The activation verb, realize, imagine, understand, and then so right here comes right here on the after activation verbs comes the state or the action you want them to take, and the adjectives is an option if you want to make them to help the brain of the person process what you say more easily. Then easily, rapidly, unconsciously, intuitively, naturally. All those things are kind of powder. They are kind of sprinkles you can use on your suggestions. They are not obligatory, they're not needed. They're just things that help. And the big thing with embedded commands is that just for the person to conceptually, cognitively understand what you're talking about, they have to make a representation in their mind of what you just said. So if I start to talk about my friend John, who always struggled with women, and someday he started to imagine himself, imagine, activation verb, he started to imagine himself growing the confidence that he always needed to finally approach the woman of his dreams. And then what happened is that he approached about a dozen women and he found the lady of his dreams as he married her. Post-hypnotic suggestion, that's still another thing. But the suggestion, the immediate command is there. So my friend John, quote, started to imagine himself, imagine, activation verb, growing the confidence and approaching, command, the action or the state you want them to get into, and then boom, boom, boom. Just by expressing that, if we are talking about a situation that has some meaning for you, because you are my client, you come in therapy, in this context, just me saying that will already build a representation in your mind of what it looks like, feels like, and sounds like to experience this, to live that dream or get to this result. So Milton Erickson was talking like that all day long. Just you being surrounded by somebody like this, or even Bandler, for like one day, or Bandler in seminars, that's what he does all the time. You have been grasping tons and tons and tons and tons of messages, even if you didn't ask for it. You have been asking for it kind of unconsciously because you went on the seminar, but you didn't say anything. But just him planting all those messages nonstop with all his stories, at some point, one of them is going to hit your mind. I mean, it's going to hit your mind in a more meaningful, deeper way. Maybe a lot of the suggestions will just not have a huge impact. You will experience them in your head, but they won't have a huge impact. But one of them at some point is going to hit. It's going to hit either a blockage you have been holding for many years, or will make you elaborate the solution you always needed for the past 2 years or 3 years about your business, about your relationship, about whatever. All those things are there to nurture the unconscious mind of the person. They have to make it clear in their mind just to understand what you're talking about. This is the beauty of the Milton model. You don't need to force people, you just talk as a matter of fact. And actually, you infuse a lot of messages unconsciously into the head of the person in front of you. Technique number 27, finally, the last one for this mini course, this expose that we have spent together here today, sleight of mouth. And sleight of mouth is a topic, same thing than the Milton model and the meta model. It would take probably 5 or 10 hours to really deconstruct everything. I'm going to give, same thing, a simplified version right here that you can find up here. And this is my simplified version, my simplified model to start having a good understanding of it and figure out that it's all about the directions your communication takes, much more than, oh, he said this word or that word. This is just a byproduct. The words you say is just a byproduct. What you need to guide your mind in a better way is in which direction you want to take the conversation. Another way of planting that is to see it like a joystick. You either can go up, you can go sideways in the past, or like before, after, or like chunking down to smaller, more specific components, or just hit right at the core. So we are going to deconstruct all of that. Sleight of mouth in the beginning was modeled by Robert Dilts, because he was noticing that when Richard Bandler, who had been modeling Milton Erickson, was speaking, he was always very elegantly reframing and changing the beliefs of any person coming to him, but without really forcing it. So the Milton model is all about the language, the way you phrase suggestions. This sleight of mouth is more, in my opinion, the overall structure, which in the end still comes from Milton Erickson because it was the trail of modeling that happened. But it is more the overall structure of how your mind thinks about the conversation. And when you're stuck somewhere in the conversation, you don't know anymore what to say. This model, sleight of mouth, is all about figuring out where to go from here. So in the beginning, we have the main argument, the main thing the person is telling you. I'm stuck at my job, I can't escape. So the first reframing, the first redefining is just to redefine the main idea. You say you're stuck. Would you have another word to express how stuck you are? Would you have a kinder way of calling the feeling of calling low self-esteem? You say you are low self-esteem. Because I didn't grow up with nice parents, I'm low self-esteem. Would you have a kinder way of expressing what low self-esteem is about? Or what if, or you can directly go into the suggestion, what if it was just lack of empathy for yourself? So you're redefining low self-esteem into lack of empathy for yourself. Here we are just in the middle. We are just in the blue square into redefining the main core idea. Then on the sides, we can go into the intention. So in the sleight of mouth, it is intention pattern. Okay, what made you in the past? Very easy. On the left, past. On the right, future. Basic grammar, basic when you were 5-6 years old, you have learned how to read, at least in the Western society. You know how this works. Left, past, you stop there. Future, right, future. That's all there is to it. Original intention. Intention, what made you? What made you feel like you were low self-esteem? What is the original event that made you feel like that? And you can reframe, or you can reframe right away the intention. What if those experiences you have felt during your whole life were actually just what built what was going to become the new version of yourself? Because so far you're still trapped in the past. What if all those things you have lived so far are actually nothing more than what have been used to build the foundation of the new person you are becoming right now? So now I'm reframing the intention. The person says, because all my life was shit, I'm just low self-esteem. And I'm reframing the intention, the past. What if all of that, all the things you have lived in your past, were actually just the ground foundation of who you are becoming right now? And you go from there, you see, are they resisting? Do they think it is nonsense? In which case you go into another pattern right away. Never stay stuck on something that people don't respond to. It is just a matter of pointing out different things like that. Consequence is about what will happen in the future. The classical way of using the consequence pattern is with something negative that Tony Robbins has been doing a lot with the Scrooge pattern, where he was explaining to people how shitty and difficult and terrible their life is going to be if they don't change. He would paint the most horrible, tragic future that will arise if their life doesn't change, if they don't take action, the necessary action to start changing. This is a consequence pattern. If you don't change, then X will happen. You can also paint a positive future by using some post-hypnotic suggestion or doing some future pacing. So the person is feeling better. Okay, and tell me, 10 years from now, what will happen that hasn't happened yet, but that will happen because of your positive change right now. So if you say that you feel more elegant, you feel more confident right now, let's add 2 more years on that level of confidence. And it kept growing during 2 years. What are you doing after 2 years that you could never do before? Same thing, it is a consequence pattern. Or people who are just finding the most terrible, difficult things. They are like hyper anxious because they keep watching the news and they are always super anxious about this will happen. Now, for example, with the AI, people who like conspiracy theories or who just are paranoid about many things, they read about ChatGPT and the OpenAI, and they think the AI will end up like Terminator, ending up the human race. Fine, you can just ask them, or you can just talk about, this bright economist or this bright scientific, whoever you quote, same thing, Milton model, you just quote somebody, whoever it is. This person actually studied AI for the past 20 years, and he noticed all those innovations, and he says that the world is going to go toward this positive future because it is going to replace jobs that all people couldn't do, but at the same time, those people will be able to use AI to generate another source of income or whatever is the suggestion. You can invent anything here. Just, you can always reframe what people think about the future, what they think about their past, and you just go in different directions. Again, this is just the overall formula here. It is not like the specific phrases to say here and here. I have many videos on that on the channel and courses on this too, for which specific things to say against which person at which moment, for which scenario. I have courses and videos on that. Here it is more about the overall structure so that you don't keep questioning, it's so complicated. the goal is that you think it is super simple, because it really is when you have this simplified version. Next, when we go up higher frame, context, authority. Authority is kind of an added thing. You can just stay on the higher frame and context. Higher frame and context is what is above the situation right here. What else has threat to this situation? So Jack is low self-esteem because he is at his job and nobody likes him. This is the main basic frame. If we go higher, what else does exist about Jack that is not low self-esteem and him being stuck at his job? What else into his life? So on the higher, broader frame, what else is there that is not making him feel like a piece of garbage? What else can be described? Which other behavior can he have, or which other behavior maybe he had in the past? The past is more intention, but whatever. Which other behaviors, successes can he have, or which other things, passions does he have that makes him somebody unique and somebody special? Instead of just staying stuck on one very basic thing, like because I'm at my job, I don't have a higher salary, I'm just a piece of garbage. On the broader frame, what else is there? Or on the higher authority, who can you become? Higher side, higher frame. Who can you become? Who can be more than what you have right now? Who is a version of you, or a next version of you, coming back to consequence, future? Who is a higher version of you who can overcome all of that? Robert Dills even had a funny exercise in his book on Sleight of Mouth, where he was taking, for example, I think a mother, he was explaining that with a mother who says she can't help her, she can't find a job, but the criteria becomes what would make you find a job even if you can't. Something like this. Well, if my son was sick and I had to make money to get him like this, and then he would get on another layer again. What would make you find a job even if your son was sick and even if you couldn't get money right away to save him? Like the first thing you tried is already gone. What would motivate you even more? And then he just kept overemphasizing like this. At some point, you just get in touch with some really deep motives, like the thing nothing could really get you away from accomplishing this thing. This is higher frame, higher purpose, higher identity. All those higher things, you can just always bring the person to something broader in the scope of their ambitions and the things they want to accomplish than just the basic thing that is here at hand. And then on the more specific one, details, reasons, specific information. So when we have covered the MED model about going down, all those specific information are going to be found with how do you know that? How specifically can you do this? You say you want to feel confident. How specifically someone is capable of becoming confident by means you think you don't have right now? What specifically are they doing that you're not doing? Coming back to this easier version, so the joystick, redefine the components. You say you don't have the main components, so people who are confident just have more money. Okay, so it's only about money, apparently. So redefining the smaller components. What is money for you? What is it for you? Is it just like a piece of paper? Is it just digits on a screen? Is it power? Oh, you said power. It is power. Okay, what makes power? What is power? Same thing, redefining the smaller components. You say power, what is it about? How is it made? I don't know what, I'm just dumb, I don't know what it is about. How is it made? Oh, because power, it's like when you have people below you, like you're giving orders. Ah, so actually what you want is give orders, right? Oh no, I just don't want. So what do you want? And at some point we're going to get to something like, I just want to feel respected. Okay, so what makes you think you don't feel respected? And boom, boom, boom. We can just get deeper on the main problem, but people always come with all those defense mechanisms. They just come with many things that are not essential, many things they think are really relevant, which in the end are just not. So by using this way of mentally switching phrases, you will just find, all the time you will find a direction in which the person is not prepared to battle, let's say their defense mechanisms are not prepared to battle on this field. When you keep switching like that on the higher frame, on the main idea, on the intention, on the consequence, on the components, at some point their defenses are gonna drop. The only question is how patient are you? Because obviously the first few sentences you say are not going to lead to a big positive change. But when you're patient enough, you will always find a way to make people reframe their own limitations. Again, same as the Milton model, you can find, there are many language patterns about sleight of mouth, and you will find most of them, or if not all of them, on my channel. Just type sleight of mouth into the search bar and you will find many videos on that, breakdowns of people using it. Same with the Milton model, hypnotic language, and I have courses on that now if you want to get deeper on this. And I hope this video was relevant for you. You learned a few things interesting. It would be my pleasure to give you some more value or information if you post in the comments some specific things you want to see more of. And please subscribe, because we are here to elevate our level together, me and you, all together in this nice and bright community. So subscribe, and I will see you very soon in the next videos.